The wind howled across the high plains like a living beast, clawing at the pines and hurling white fangs of snow through the canyons. It was no ordinary winter storm. It was the kind that erased trails, silenced animals, and buried men whole. By the time the sun disappeared behind the ridges, even the strongest hunters had sought shelter. But Tarek, the quiet Apache who lived far from his people, pressed on. He had set out before dawn to check his traps near the frozen creek. He moved like a ghost among the trees' tall lean, wrapped in a wolfskin cloak that whipped in the wind. His long black hair was crusted with frost, and his breath came in clouds that vanished into the storm. Solitude was his only companion now, and he had made peace with it years ago. When the wind shifted, Tarek froze. Something faint, almost lost in the storm's roar, a sound that didn't belong to the wilderness. He turned his head and listened again. A cry, thin, frightened, human. Without thinking, he dropped the foxtrap he carried and followed the sound. Snow reached his knees as he trudged forward, each step a battle against the storm. The cries came again closer now, two small voices calling in a language he knew all too well. Apache. His heart quickened. No one should be out here, not children. At last, through the swirl of white, he saw movement beneath a fallen pine. He knelt, brushing away snow, and found two small girls, no older than 7 or 8, pressed together under a blanket stiff with ice. Their faces were pale, their lips blue. One of them stirred weakly and whispered something, Nada G, the word for mother. Tarek's throat tightened. Without hesitation, he pulled them into his arms, tucking their tiny bodies inside his cloak to share his warmth. He could feel how light they were, nearly weightless, like birds who'd lost their wings. He looked around. The tracks behind them were already gone, swallowed by the storm. Whoever they had been with, parents, tribe, travelers, were lost to the blizzard. He could not linger. If he stayed here, they would die within the hour. Hold on, he murmured, his voice deep but gentle. He shifted one child to his back and the other in his arms. Then began the long climb toward the ridge where his cabin lay hidden. The storm clawed at him, pushing him back, but Tarek had survived worse. His legs burned, his breath tore through his chest, but he never slowed. By the time he reached the cabin, darkness had devoured the sky. He kicked open the door, laid the children near the hearth, and stoked the fire with trembling hands. The cabin smelled of smoke and cedar, a poor man's shelter, but warm. He stripped off his soaked cloak and wrapped the girls in buffalo hides, rubbing their small hands to bring back life. When one whimpered, he fed her a sip of snowmalt. The other's eyes fluttered, open dark eyes, like polished obsidian, watching him with fear and confusion. It's all right, he said quietly in Apache. You're safe now. The smaller one began to cry softly, whispering something about their father, their village. Tarek didn't ask questions. The past was a wound he knew better than to open. But as he listened, he caught a single word that made his blood stir. Chief. They were no ordinary lost children. Their clothes were finely woven, trimmed with white beads and silver buttons. Someone powerful would be searching for them. Tarek sighed, sitting back against the wall. He had never wanted to be part of anyone's story again. Solitude had been his refuge, his punishment, his peace. Yet here he was, saving lives again, his heart betraying the quiet he'd built. Outside, the blizzard roared on, burying the world in silence. Inside, 2 little girls breathed softly beside the fire. Tarek watched the flames dance across their faces and felt something stir deep within him, something warm. Dangerous and alive. He didn't know it yet. But that night, the storm had brought him not just strangers. It had brought him back to life. By dawn, the storm had softened to a hush, though the world outside remained locked in white. The pines drooped under heavy snow, and the air held the stillness of a land reborn. Inside Tarek's small cabin, the fire burned low. casting a trembling orange light over the room and over the two small girls. Sleeping near the hearth, Tarek sat cross-legged beside them, silent as a stone, watching the rise and fall of their breathing. He had fed the fire through the night, listening to the wind's endless cry. His hands were raw from the cold, but he had not slept. He feared that if he closed his eyes, they might stop breathing, and he could not bear to lose another innocent life. When the taller of the two stirred, he leaned forward. Her lashes fluttered open, revealing eyes as dark and sharp as river obsidian. She blinked up at him, confused, frightened. "She," Tarek murmured softly in Apache, his voice deep and rough from disuse. "You are safe, little one. The storm is gone." The girl's small fingers clutched the buffalo hide. "Where is my father?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "He told us to run to the trees." Then everything turned white. Tarek looked toward the shuttered window, where snow still pressed against the glass. "Your father will find you," he said simply. He did not tell her how wide and wild the storm had been, nor how easily men vanished in its fury. He rose and moved to the corner, where a pot of snowmalt simmered over the fire. He added a handful of dried herbs, cedar, sage, and willow bark, his mother's old remedy for fever. Then he broke a strip of smoked deer meat and set it before the girls when both had woken. They ate in silence, the smaller one keeping her eyes on him with cautious curiosity. The cabin was simple. One cot, a rough-hewn table, shelves lined with jars of dried berries, pelts hanging from the beams. It smelled of smoke and pine resin. To most, it would seem lonely. But to Tarek, it was home, a place untouched by betrayal or blood. As the children ate, he studied them quietly. Their hair was braided with fine leather cords, and around their necks hung tiny silver pendants etched with the mark of a chief's family. He recognized it instantly, though he said nothing. The powerful chief Nahuel, leader of the valley tribes, bore that same mark. These were his children, the twins of the chief's bloodline. Tarek's pulse quickened. He had once fought beside that man in the wars against the settlers, before exile had driven him into solitude. If the chief learned that Tarek had his daughters, old wounds might reopen, and not all of them could be healed. Still, when the smaller twin coughed, Tarek pushed those thoughts aside. He fetched a fur cloak, wrapped it around her shoulders, and spoke gently. "Rest. The fire will watch over you now." The girl reached for his hand, small, cold fingers curling around his scarred palm. "Thank you," she whispered, and her eyes closed again. Tarek sat back, uneasy with the feeling that settled in his chest. Gratitude, trust, things he had long forgotten the warmth of. He turned toward the window again. Outside, the light had grown pale and still. The storm had left the forest reborn, yet the silence it carried was not peace. It was a warning. Someone would come looking for these girls, warriors, riders, and when they did, they would not come gently. Still, as he looked back at the twins, their faces peaceful, their small hands tangled together, Tarek felt a quiet vow forming in his heart that no matter who they belonged to, he would protect them. They had survived the storm because of him, and now he would survive the world for them. As the day passed, he fed the fire, mended their clothes, and prepared what little food he had. The cabin, once cold and empty, now carried the faint sound of laughter and small voices. Tarek didn't realize it yet, but as the snow began to melt on his doorstep, the hunter's cabin had become a home, and the walls that once protected him from the world were slowly opening to life again. That night, when the girls finally drifted into sleep, the cabin fell quiet once more. Only the low crackle of the fire and the sigh of wind against the shutters filled the space. Tarek sat alone by the flames, his face half in shadow. sharpening the edge of his hunting knife out of habit more than purpose. The silence should have comforted him. It always had before, but now it pressed against him, full of thoughts he'd long buried. Every glance toward the sleeping twins stirred something deeper than he was ready to face. Their tiny hands curled under their chins, their black hair spread across the furs. Reminded him too much of what he had lost years ago. He had lived in a different cabin, not far from here, before the war between tribes and settlers tore the valley apart. He had not been alone then. He had been a husband, a father-to-be, a man with hope in his chest instead of scars. Her name had been Kaya. She was the daughter of a medicine woman, soft-spoken but fierce, with laughter that filled every silence he used to hide in. She would hum songs while weaving or grinding corn. And Tarek had believed, foolishly, that the world could not take someone so pure. But the world took everything. It had been spring when the soldiers came, pale-skinned men with rifles and torches, claiming they were clearing the land for settlers. They called it peacekeeping. Tarek called it fire. He could still smell the smoke, hear Kaya scream, see her arms wrapped around her swollen belly as he fought to reach her through the flames. He had killed 3 men that night, maybe more, but not enough to save her. When he finally found her, it was too late. The fire had taken his family, his people scattered, his tribe broken. He had wandered into the mountains that summer and never returned. The man who'd once laughed beside the fire had died with her, replaced by the quiet hunter who now lived only by instinct. Not hope. He set down the knife and rubbed his eyes, the blade's reflection catching the firelight. For years he had kept that memory locked away, deep and cold. But the twins, they had cracked it open. When he found them in the snow, small and helpless, something old had awakened inside him, something he thought he'd buried forever. He had told himself it was duty, a warrior's instinct to protect the weak. But as he watched them sleep, he knew the truth. It wasn't duty. It was love, fragile and dangerous. He turned toward the fire, whispering under his breath in the language of prayers his grandmother once taught him. Great Spirit, keep them safe. Do not take them from me too. For a long while he just sat there, listening to the rhythm of their breathing. It was strange, the comfort he found in it, the steady sound of life beside him. Then, in her sleep, one of the girls murmured, "Father, don't leave us." Tarek froze. The word pierced through him like an arrow. Slowly, he moved closer, kneeling beside them. He brushed a strand of hair from the child's forehead, his calloused fingers trembling. "I won't," he said quietly. Not this time. It wasn't a promise he planned to make, but it came from somewhere deeper than thought. Outside, the snow was melting in patches, the forest whispering beneath the weight of ice. Soon, others would come. The chief's men, maybe even soldiers. Tarek knew he couldn't hide the girls forever, but for tonight, they were safe, warm, alive. He leaned back against the wall, the fire painting gold across his face. He had saved them from the blizzard, but they had saved something in him too, something he hadn't even realized was dying. When he finally closed his eyes, the cabin no longer felt like a prison of solitude. It felt like a heartbeat. And somewhere deep in the night, Tarek dreamed, for the first time in years, not of loss, but of life returning with the spring. The forest outside Tarek's cabin had changed overnight. Snow still clung to the pines, but the storm's fury had softened into an eerie quiet. Tracks, once buried, began to reveal themselves beneath a thin layer of fresh frost. Tarek had been watching, listening, his senses stretched taut like a drawn bow. Something was coming. He had expected the wind, the hunters, maybe wolves. But not this. By mid-morning, he saw them, a line of figures moving through the trees, careful but determined. Apache warriors, their horses kicking up patches of snow, their faces tense with purpose. At the front rode a man taller than the rest, his presence commanding the air around him. Chief Nahul. Tarak froze. The moment his eyes met the chief's, 100 unspoken accusations seemed to hang in the air. Tarak's heart sank. He knew instantly the truth of what the warriors had been sent to find. The twins, Nahul's daughters, missing in the blizzard. And here they were, safe in his cabin. Tarak's mind raced. He had no wish for confrontation, no desire for anger or blame. Yet he also could not abandon the girls, not now. They stirred at the noise outside, peering at him with wide, frightened eyes. He moved quickly, gathering the twins. One clutched at his neck, the other tugged at his hand. "We have to go," he whispered. "Stay quiet. Don't be afraid." But the snow was too deep, the ground uneven, and the chief scouts had already spotted him. Within moments, Tarak found himself surrounded, the girls pressed close to his chest. Spears glinted in the muted light, faces hard with suspicion. "Put the children down," a voice commanded. The weight of authority cut through the cold sharper than any blade. Tarak's eyes flicked upward. Nahul. The chief's eyes were dark, almost stormy, but not unkind. He studied Tarak, reading him like an open river. "I found them in the storm," Tarak said quietly, holding the twins closer. They were alone. They would have died. The chief's hand went to his belt, where a knife gleamed. "Do you think me blind? Do you think my daughters were lost by mere chance? Who are you to take them?" Tarak's jaw tightened. He did not flinch. "I am no one," he said. "I am a hunter. I follow tracks. I follow the wind. Nothing more. But they are alive because of me." A tense silence fell. The snow seemed to hold its breath. The warriors shifted, unease spreading among them. The twins whispered softly in the Apache tongue, pointing to Tarak. "He saved us," they said. "He kept us safe." Nahul's gaze flicked between Tarak and the children, his jaw tightening as realization dawned. The girls were unharmed, their fine clothing barely touched by frost. Yet pride and anger warred inside him. How dare a stranger, a solitary hunter of no rank, intervene in the life of his blood? Tarak took a careful step back, still holding the twins. "I do not seek honor," he said. "I only seek to keep them alive. That is all I have done." The chief's voice dropped to a low growl. "You will come with us. We will see what spirit guides you." Tarak nodded once, understanding that resistance would only endanger the children. Yet inside he bristled. He had saved them, yes, but he also knew that the chief's judgment could tip either way, gratitude or fury. As the twins clung to him, the hunters and warriors formed a silent procession, leading Tarak and the children through the snow-laden forest. The cabin, the fire, and the safety of his mountain refuge faded behind them. Out here in the cold expanse, the real storm was just beginning, the storm of suspicion, pride, and the weight of a father's fury. And yet, as Tarak glanced down at the twins' trusting faces, he felt a quiet determination take root. No matter what lay ahead, he would protect them, even if it meant standing against a chief, against a tribe, against the world itself. The snow crunched underfoot, the forest stretched endlessly, and Tarak's silent vow echoed louder than any storm. They would not fall again, not on his watch. The tribal camp lay in a sheltered valley, smoke rising in lazy spirals from several lodges. The twins clutched Tarak's hands as he followed behind the chief and his warriors, their wide eyes taking in the familiar sounds of drums, chatter, and the distant cry of hawks circling above. For them, it was home. For Tarak, it was a trap. As they approached the central fire circle, the chief called out in a voice that commanded silence. The camp stilled. Every warrior, every woman, every child turned toward the intruders. The twins' sudden reappearance sparked gasps and whispers. The crowd parted to reveal Tarek, standing alone. The girls pressed close to him. "Step forward, stranger," Nawal demanded. His tone was steel, and every eye followed. "Who are you, and why do you carry my daughters in your arms?" Tarek stepped forward slowly, keeping the girls between him and the crowd. "I am Tarek," he said quietly. "I am a hunter, nothing more. I found your daughters lost in the storm. They would have died had I not carried them to safety." A murmur ran through the camp. Some nodded, impressed by his courage. Others whispered doubts. Who was this man? Why should a lone hunter intervene in the life of a chief's children? Some eyes narrowed, thinking of vengeance, of pride insulted. Nawal's hand moved to the hilt of his knife. "You bring strangers into my lodge. You touch the sacred blood of my family. You must answer for your deeds." His voice rose, echoing through the valley. "Explain yourself, or face the judgment of the tribe." Tarek's jaw tightened. He did not flinch, though his pulse raced. He had saved the twins, yes, but he had also disrupted the order of this place, and he knew the chief's anger could be lethal. Still, he could not abandon the girls now. "They were alone," he said again, his voice steady. "Snow and cold would have killed them. I brought them here. I fed them. I kept them alive. That is all I have done. I asked no reward, no favor, only to protect them from the storm and the world outside." The twins stepped forward, small hands gripping Tarek's sleeves. They spoke clearly, their voices carrying across the fire circle. "He saved us." The elder twin said, "He gave us fire. He gave us food. He did not leave us to die." The camp fell silent. Even Nawal hesitated, studying the twins' earnest faces. Then the younger girl spoke, her voice trembling but unwavering. "He is kind. He is our friend. He kept us safe when the snow tried to take us." Whispers ran through the crowd. Some warriors exchanged glances, unsure. The tribe had always respected courage and skill, yet suspicion lingered like smoke. A few murmured about the dangers of trusting strangers. Others looked at Tarek with newfound respect. After all, who else could have survived the storm and carried 2 children through it? Nawal's eyes softened briefly, but pride and worry warred within him. Finally, he raised his voice again, though it was quieter now. "Tarek, you have done what many could not. But you are not yet one of us. We will decide your fate." The chief motioned to his warriors. "Take him to the fire circle. Let the tribe witness and judge his spirit. If he is truly guided by honor and courage, then he may remain among us. If not," his gaze hardened, "the Great Spirit will speak." Tarek nodded silently, the twins clinging to him still. He did not resist. He could face the fire of judgment as he had faced the blizzard, the wolves, and death itself died as they led him toward the sacred circle. Tarek glanced down at the children. Their trust gave him strength. No accusation, no fury, no pride could shake his resolve. He had saved them once. Now he would face whatever trial awaited. The camp held its breath. The quiet hunter had become the center of the tribe's scrutiny, and in that moment, Tarek realized something he had not felt in years. He no longer walked alone. The fire circle burned brightly in the center of the tribal camp, a ring of flickering orange that cast long shadows across the gathered faces. Every warrior, woman, and child had come to witness this moment, the day a stranger dared touch the chief's blood. Tarek stood at the center. The twins pressed close to him, their tiny hands gripping his sleeves. He could feel the weight of 100 eyes on his back, a mixture of suspicion, awe, and fear. Nawal, the chief, paced slowly around the circle, his boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and Tarek could sense the storm within him: pride, anger, and the flicker of hope. "Tarek," the chief said finally, his voice carrying over the hush of the crowd, "you have carried my daughters through snow and wind, but do you understand the gravity of what you have done?" "I do," Tarek said quietly. "I saved them. I ask nothing more. My life is yours to judge." A murmur ran through the gathered tribe. Some were impressed by his courage. Others whispered about the audacity of a stranger intervening in the sacred affairs of the chief's family. Nahual raised his hand, and silence fell once more. "The fire circle will decide," the chief declared. "It is the oldest custom of our people. Here, the spirit of truth speaks through flames and smoke. Let the shaman guide us." From the edge of the circle, the tribe's shaman stepped forward, his long hair streaked with gray, eyes glinting with the knowledge of visions and the unseen. In his hands, he carried a bundle of sacred herbs, which he tossed into the fire. Smoke curled and danced, filling the cold air with the scent of cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. The fire crackled and leapt as though alive, responding to the tension of the night. The shaman muttered prayers in the old tongue, calling on the Great Spirit to reveal the truth. Tarek knelt slightly, his head bowed in respect, though he did not fear the flames. He had stared death in the face countless times, yet this trial felt heavier than any storm. Smoke swirled upward, and the shaman's voice rose. "The spirit walks with this hunter. He carries the blood of the lost within his heart. His hands are steady, his courage true. He honors the children, and in saving them, he honors the tribe." A stunned silence followed. The chief's jaw tightened. Could this be true? Could a man unknown to them truly have acted with honor worthy of their traditions? Tarek rose slowly, letting the firelight fall across his face. "I only did what any man should do," he said humbly. "Children cannot survive alone. They needed help. I gave it." The shaman stepped closer to Nahual. "Chief, the spirits speak clearly. This man's path is intertwined with yours and with your daughters. He has risked his life, not for glory, but for life itself. The tribe cannot ignore the truth of his spirit." Whispers spread like wildfire through the circle. Some warriors nodded, others exchanged skeptical glances, but even the chief could not ignore the words. His daughters peeked from behind Tarek, their trust in him evident in their wide, innocent eyes. Nahual took a deep breath, his voice quieter now but no less commanding. "Tarek, you have passed the trial of the fire circle. You are free, and the tribe will not hold your deeds against you. But understand this. From this day forward, your life is bound to mine, to my blood, and to the safety of my children." Tarek inclined his head, accepting the chief's words. Relief surged through him, yet he kept it hidden behind a calm exterior. The girls hugged his legs, laughter and tears mingling as the tension finally broke. The shaman whispered one last blessing into the fire. The smoke twisted upward, carrying the promise of protection and guidance for the days to come. For the first time in years, Tarek felt a quiet peace. He had faced the storm outside, and now he had faced the storm within the tribe. Both trials had tested him, yet he had endured. And in the heart of that fire circle, surrounded by the people who once could have condemned him, he found something he had long thought lost: acceptance, purpose, and a place in a world he had fled. The fire crackled, sending flickering shadows across the faces of the gathered tribe. Even after the trial, tension lingered like the cold after a storm. The twins huddled close to Tarek, their eyes wide and wary, while Nahual, the chief, paced. Near the circle, his mind still wrestling with the events of the day. The shaman, old and stooped, stepped forward once more. His long gray hair swayed as he moved, and in his hands he carried a small bundle of herbs and bones. The scent of sage and cedar filled the air as he placed the bundle into the fire. The flames hissed and danced, curling upward in intricate patterns, as if the Great Spirit itself had taken notice. The shaman's voice rose in the ancient tongue, low and rhythmic. He closed his eyes, letting the smoke curl around him, and began a chant that seemed to echo off the mountains themselves. The tribe fell silent, their attention fixed on the ritual. Suddenly, the shaman spoke, his voice carrying a note of awe. "The Spirit has shown me visions," he said slowly. "A path that winds through snow and silence, through fear and solitude, leads to the hearts of the lost. There, a hunter waits, a man whose hands carry life, whose soul shields innocence. He is bound to your blood, Chief, whether you know it or not." Nawal's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself," he demanded. Pride and suspicion warred in his gaze. "The children," the shaman said, pointing toward the twins. "They were not merely lost. They were chosen, protected by the Great Spirit, and led to safety by one who walks between the worlds. His spirit walks with yours. He is a guardian of your line, Chief. Where he treads, no harm may pass." Gasps rose from the crowd. The twins, too young to fully understand, looked at Tarak with awe, their small hands tightening around his cloak. Even the warriors murmured among themselves. The idea that a stranger could be tied so closely to the chief's family was startling, almost unbelievable, yet the shaman's certainty was undeniable. Tarak remained silent, his head bowed slightly, though his pulse quickened. He had lived his life in shadows, hiding from past grief, from responsibilities he could no longer bear. Yet the shaman's words made it clear that his fate was no longer entirely his own. The twins' survival, the chief's bloodline, and his own path were intertwined now. "Spirit and blood are one," the shaman continued, his voice rising. "This hunter's courage has not gone unnoticed. He honors life, and in honoring life, he honors the tribe. Chief, if you doubt him, the Spirit will guide you, but doubt too long, and you risk turning fortune into misfortune." Nahwal looked down at Tarak, the weight of leadership and the fierce pride of a father battling against his growing respect for the man before him. The twins peeked from behind Tarak, their trust unwavering, their small faces filled with hope. Something in that sight softened the chief's heart. After a long moment, Nahwal finally spoke, his voice low but carrying authority. "So be it. If the shaman speaks truth, then this man is more than he seems. He is bound to our bloodline. From this day, he shall not be treated as a stranger, but as a protector of my daughters, of my tribe, and of the life that remains in this land." Shaman nodded, stepping back from the fire. "The Spirit has spoken. Watch the signs, Chief. Guard your blood, and the hunter will guard yours." A hush settled over the camp. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Tarak glanced at the twins, then at the chief, understanding the magnitude of what had just been declared. He had not chosen this path, but the Spirit had chosen him. And from this moment forward, there would be no turning back. As the fire continued to dance, shadows twisting across the snow, Tarak felt a strange calm descend upon him. For the first time, he did not feel the crushing weight of solitude. Instead, he felt a tether, fragile, yet unbreakable, binding him to a family he had never known he could have, and to a destiny that demanded courage, honor, and heart. The shaman's vision had spoken, and in that moment, Tarak knew that his life, like the flames, would never again be his alone. The sun had dipped low behind the snow-dusted peaks, casting long golden shadows across the village. The twins, finally comfortable in the warmth and safety of the camp, laughed quietly as they played near the fire under the watchful eyes of ants and warriors. Tarak stood nearby, silent as ever, observing the life around him. He felt a pull toward something he had not felt in years. Curiosity, tension, and a quiet, unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It was then that she appeared. Ayanna, the chief's eldest daughter, stepped out from one of the lodges. She was tall for her age, with the same dark eyes as her sisters, sharp and alert. Her braided hair caught the last of the sunlight, and beads glinted along the strands like tiny sparks of fire. Unlike many in the tribe, she did not rush to judgment. She had seen fear, loss, and courage all before. Yet her gaze held a spark of wariness as it settled on the quiet hunter. "Father says you found them," Ayanna said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of command. "And now you stand here among us, untested by our people." Tarak inclined his head slightly. "I have only kept them safe," he replied simply, his tone calm, though each word carried the gravity of his deeds. "No harm has come to them while I was near." Her dark eyes searched him, as if trying to unravel the secrets hidden behind his silence. She noticed the scars on his arms, the calluses on his hands, the quiet strength in the way he carried himself. He did not boast, he did not speak unnecessarily, yet every action hinted at a life forged in trials, survival, and solitude. "You are quiet," Ayanna said, stepping closer. "But quiet can hide much or reveal more than words ever could." Tarak looked at her, startled that she had perceived so much. "I have learned to speak only when needed," he said. The rest is survival." Ayanna studied him for a long moment. Then, as if testing the truth of his words, she knelt near the twins. Her soft hands smoothed their hair, her presence a mixture of warmth and authority. "They trust you," she said, glancing at Tarak. "That alone tells me more than your explanations ever could." The twins giggled, calling for both Tarak and Ayanna to join them. The scene, simple yet profound, was enough to dissolve some of the tension that had lingered since the fire circle. Ayanna looked at Tarak again, this time with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He did not smile, did not reach for her, yet there was a quiet acknowledgment between them, a bond forming in the silence and shared responsibility of protecting the children. "You saved them," she said finally, her voice softer now, "and for that you have earned the tribe's trust. But trust alone does not make a man part of our lives. That must be proven." Tarak's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "Then I will prove it," he said. The promise was not just for the tribe, not just for the children, but for her, the chief's daughter, whose strength and spirit had already begun to chip at the walls he had built around himself. Ayanna studied him a moment longer, then nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Very well. We will see if your deeds match your words." As the sun finally disappeared behind the mountains, the firelight reflected in their eyes. Two paths, one forged in silence and solitude, the other in responsibility and bloodline, had crossed. The air between them was charged, unspoken but unmistakable. A connection had begun, subtle yet undeniable, one that would test courage, loyalty, and the fragile stirrings of something more than survival. Tarak had lived for years in shadows. Yet now, in the warmth of the fire and under the watchful eyes of Ayanna, he felt something he had thought lost forever: hope. The first snow had barely melted when word reached the tribe. A rival band had been seen moving toward the valley. Their intent was clear: kidnap the chief's daughters for leverage or worse. The news spread quickly, and the village, though prepared for winter, was not prepared for human savagery. Tarak was already by the fire, tending the twins, when the messengers arrived. The girls clutched his cloak wide-eyed. Their small hands pressed into his arms, and he felt a surge of protectiveness stronger than anything he had felt in years. This was no blizzard. This was a storm of men, and it would test every skill he had learned in the mountains. Now all called a meeting at the edge of the lodge circle. Warriors gathered, faces grim, breath steaming in the cold morning air. Tarak stepped forward quietly, not asking permission. He had promised protection once. He would do so again. "You saved my daughters once," Narwhal said, voice firm but tinged with urgency. "Now the world tests us again. Stand with us." Tarek nodded. "I will stand. Let me fight by your side." The chief studied him for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Then fight as one of us. Protect the blood of the tribe." The rival band approached by the ridge. Their war cries carried faintly on the wind. Tarek moved silently into the trees with a small group of warriors, scouting the attackers' position. He had spent years navigating forests and mountains in silence. Now, that skill would decide the fate of the chief's daughters. When the first arrows whistled toward the camp, Tarek was ready. He fired his own bow with deadly precision, dropping one of the attackers before they could reach the tents. The twins huddled behind blankets inside the lodge, safe for now, while he moved like a shadow, intercepting each threat before it could harm the children. Ayanna joined the warriors, her eyes sharp and steady. Though she did not fight alongside him directly at first, she watched Tarek closely, noting his skill, his silence, and the deliberate way he protected the tribe. Every move he made was calculated, each step a promise that not one of the chief's daughters would fall on his watch. Hours passed, the air filled with smoke, shouts, and the clash of steel. At one point, a rider broke through the perimeter, heading straight for the twins' lodge. Without hesitation, Tarek leapt from the trees, intercepting the man with a force born of survival and fury. He wrestled the attacker to the ground, saving the girls in a heartbeat. The tide of the battle shifted slowly but decisively. The attackers, unprepared for such precise defense and the unity of the tribe under Tarek's guidance, began to retreat. By the time the last man fled into the trees, the camp had suffered no casualties. The fire burned brighter as warriors cheered and the twins ran to Tarek, throwing themselves into his arms. Narwhal stepped forward, placing a hand on Tarek's shoulder. His dark eyes were filled with something closer to awe than gratitude. "You have proven yourself, Hunter," he said. "Not just in skill, but in heart. The spirit guided you here, but your courage kept my blood alive." Tarek looked down at the twins, their small faces radiant with relief, then at Ayanna, whose eyes reflected a mix of pride and something softer, recognition, perhaps even admiration. He did not speak, for words were not needed. Actions had spoken louder than any declaration. For the first time in years, Tarek felt the weight of solitude lift. He had faced storms before, snow, loss, death. Yet this battle, fought with honor and for the sake of life, felt different. It was not just survival. It was connection, loyalty, and belonging. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting the valley in gold and shadow, Tarek realized that the second storm had not only tested his skill, but had bound him irrevocably to the chief, his daughters, and the tribe. And in that realization, he found the stirrings of something long absent, hope, trust, and the quiet bloom of something more. Spring had arrived in the valley, though patches of snow still clung stubbornly to the cliffs and hollows. The air carried the scent of thawing earth, wildflowers timidly breaking through frost, and the faint smoke of village fires. Tarek stood at the edge of the camp, watching the twins chase each other across the open ground, laughter spilling over the land like sunlight. The battle had passed. The attackers gone, and the tribe's confidence in the quiet hunter had solidified. Even Nahuel, whose pride had once bristled at Tarek's presence, now regarded him with deep respect. The chief had seen the man's courage, his loyalty, and his steadfast protection of the bloodline he held sacred. Tarek had changed too. The solitude he had wrapped around himself for years had softened. He no longer feared connection. He no longer feared trust. The twins had awakened something in him he thought forever lost, a sense of belonging, a purpose that transcended survival. The chief approached him, the sun catching the edges of his features. His gaze was steady, carrying the weight of authority, but also something softer, more personal. He placed a hand on Tarak's shoulder, an unspoken acknowledgment of the trials the hunter had endured. "Tarak," Nahwal said, his voice quiet but firm, "you have saved my daughters. You have protected the tribe. You have proven your heart and your courage. Now it is my wish that you remain not only as their guardian but as a member of this family." Tarak's eyes met the chief's, his expression unreadable. He had expected honor, perhaps gratitude, but never acceptance of this magnitude. "I am yours to guide," he said simply, his voice low, "as long as the spirit allows me." Nawal's stern expression softened. He nodded, then turned toward his eldest daughter, Ayana, who had approached silently. Her dark eyes were bright with emotion, and she stood tall. A mixture of pride and something deeper, a challenge, an invitation. "Tarak," she said, her voice steady but intimate, "you have saved my sisters, my tribe, and the honor of my family. You have done so with courage and humility. If the spirit and the chief allow, I wish for you to remain by my side, not only as guardian, but as equal, as partner." The words hung in the air, heavy and beautiful. Tarak blinked, a warmth spreading through him he had not felt in years. His life had been one of shadows and loss, yet now, beneath the wide sky, surrounded by the children he had saved and the woman who had captured his quiet heart, he felt something he had believed impossible, hope, and the possibility of love. He knelt slightly, gathering the twins into his arms. "I will protect them," he said, looking down at their smiling faces. "And if you, Ayana, will have me, I will stand by you as well, through storms, through fire, through life itself." Ayana's lips curved into a faint, proud smile, and she stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. The twins cheered, running to circle them both, their laughter ringing through the camp. The chief watched silently, a satisfied nod acknowledging the union of courage, loyalty, and spirit. The villagers gathered around, celebrating not just survival, but unity. Tarak, once the shy, solitary hunter, had become a man of honor, a protector, and now a part of something far greater than himself. The fire from the circle still glimmered in the distance, a reminder of the trials he had endured, and the spirits that had guided him. As the sun rose higher the next morning, illuminating the valley in gold, Tarak stood beside Ayana, the twins by their side, and felt for the first time a profound truth. He was home. No longer alone, no longer wandering. Life, in all its wild beauty and danger, had finally found him worthy. And in that moment, Tarak smiled, not a quiet, hidden smile, but one that carried all the warmth, hope, and love he had once thought lost forever. The storm had passed. The valley was safe. And the shy Apache who had saved the chief's daughters had found something greater than survival: family, honor, and the promise of a future that was finally his own.